At my daughter's baby shower, I gave her a quilt I had sewn by hand. 11 months of work. Every square was cut from something she used to be. The flannel from the blanket I wrapped her in the night I brought her home from the hospital. The corduroy from her kindergarten coat. The yellow cotton from the sundress she wore the summer her father was still alive. She held it up in front of 40 people. She looked over at her mother-in-law, and she laughed. Not a real laugh. The little embarrassed one she'd learned somewhere in the last 3 years. "Mom," she said, "we registered at Williams-Sonoma." Her husband took it out of her hands. He didn't fold it. He didn't even really look at it. He dropped it on the gift table on top of the torn wrapping paper, the way you'd drop a wet towel. "Babe, your mom works in a hospital kitchen," he said, smiling at the room. "What were you expecting?" People laughed. The polite kind. The kind that tells you exactly where you sit at the table. I didn't say a word. I stood up. I walked to that gift table, and I picked my quilt back up, and I folded it the way I fold everything, slowly, with 2 hands. I put it in my bag, and I walked out across 40 acres of lawn that everybody in that room thought belonged to my daughter's new family. The next morning, I drove downtown to my attorney's office and set a folder on his assistant's desk. She opened it. She looked at the first page, then she looked at the second, and she set her coffee down very carefully and said, "Mr. Lindley, you need to come out here, right now. Engagement break 1. Before I tell you what was in that folder, let me ask you something. Have you ever made something with your own 2 hands, given it to someone you love, and watched them treat it like trash? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and I answer the ones I can. And if stories about ordinary people and the moment everything finally turns, if that's what you're here for, hit that subscribe button so the next one finds you. One honest note before we go on. I've changed some names and details for privacy and for the telling, but the heart of it is true, and the lesson is as real as the floor under your feet. Now, back to that folder. The Sterling Cove Club sits on a bluff above Lake Michigan, about 40 minutes north of the city. 40 acres of clipped grass running right down to the water. White sailboats out on the lake like somebody had scattered them there for decoration. There's a stone clubhouse with ivy on it, and a long veranda, and a rose garden where they were setting up a string trio the afternoon of the shower. There were maybe 40 guests, linen tablecloths, little towers of macarons in colors I didn't have names for, a bartender pouring sparkling something into glasses that probably cost more than I made in a shift. I stood off to the side in the one good dress I owned, navy blue, and I felt the way a sparrow feels at a peacock convention. My daughter Hannah was the center of all of it, 7 months along, glowing, in a cream-colored dress that draped over the curve of her like it had been sewn onto her that morning. Maybe it had. She moved through that crowd like she'd been raised in it, touching arms, tilting her head when she laughed. She hadn't been raised in it. She'd been raised in a 1-bedroom apartment in Bridgeport, on the southwest side of Chicago, where the freight trains ran close enough to rattle the dishes in the cupboard. Her first crib was a dresser drawer I'd lined with 2 folded towels, because the month she was born I had $11 in my checking account and a husband already getting sick. Her husband, Grant Wexford, stood next to her with his hand resting on the small of her back like a man posing for a photograph he expected to be famous someday. Tall, good jaw. The kind of easy, expensive smile that makes strangers hand him their savings, which, as it turned out, was more or less his whole career. He worked at his father's firm, Wexford and Pace Capital, managing money for wealthy retirees up and down the North Shore. He wore a watch on his wrist that would have paid my rent for a year. His mother, Carolyn Wexford, had arranged the entire shower, the venue, the menu, the guest list. I'd been informed of the date by text message. I understood I was being permitted to attend, and that I should be grateful, and so I came, and I tried to be small. I waded through the games. I waded through the gifts. Hannah sat in a white wicker chair like a throne, opening boxes wrapped in heavy paper with cloth ribbon, a Scandinavian crib that folded flat, a diaper bag that cost 4 figures, a silver baby cup from a store I'd only ever walked past. Each one earned a soft ripple of applause. Then she got to mine. I'd wrapped it in plain brown paper and tied it with kitchen twine, because I've always thought the prettiest thing about a gift is what's inside it. I saw her read the tag. I saw the little flicker go across her face, the same flicker she got every time I showed up somewhere her new life could see me, the quick scan of the room, who's watching. She slid the twine off and unfolded it. 11 months. Every night after my shift, I'd sat at my kitchen table under the one good lamp and sewn until my eyes burned. 30 squares, each one cut from a piece of her childhood, each one labeled in tiny stitched letters along the seam. Homecoming blanket, 1996. First day of school, 2001. Daddy's last Christmas, 2008. 30 years of her, cut and pieced and bound together for the baby she was carrying. She held it up by two corners. The string trio kept playing. Carolyn leaned in first. "Oh," she said. She pinched a corner of it between two manicured fingers, the way you'd lift something off the bottom of your shoe. Is this homemade?" Hannah's cheeks went pink. "Mom, we registered at Williams-Sonoma. I sent you the link." I started to explain. I started to tell her about the flannel, about the corduroy, about the yellow dress. But Grant got there first. "Babe, your mom works in a hospital kitchen." He grinned, easy and cruel, sweeping the room into the joke. "What were you expecting? A gift card?" And the room laughed. Hannah set the quilt down on the gift table, on top of the torn paper. She didn't fold it. She didn't look at me. She reached for the next box, and the party moved on like a current, right over the top of me. I sat there another 10 minutes. No one spoke to me. Across the lawn, Carolyn was bent toward another woman, both of them glancing my way, and I caught one word on the breeze: cafeteria. So I stood up. I picked my quilt back off that table, and I folded it, and I left. The parking lot was full of Range Rovers and German sedans. My Corolla was parked at the far end by the service road, where I'd been told to leave it so it wouldn't be in the photos. I sat in it a while with the quilt on the passenger seat. I didn't cry. I'd stopped crying over my daughter's choices 3 years before, the day she asked me not to come to her engagement dinner because Grant's family might find me a lot to explain. I'd gone anyway. She'd introduced me to a table of strangers as a family friend. That night I drove back to Bridgeport, to the same apartment I've lived in for 26 years. Bottom floor, 2 rooms, a kitchen you can touch both walls of, and a window that looks out at the Orange Line tracks. Every 11 minutes the train comes through and the whole place shivers like it's cold. You stop hearing it after the first year. You start to miss it when you travel. I made myself a cup of tea and I went to the hall closet and I moved the winter coats. Behind them, bolted to the floor, is a fireproof filing cabinet. I bought it the year after my husband died, when I understood that nothing in this world stays safe unless you make it safe yourself. I unlocked the top drawer. Inside, filed by neighborhood, were 31 property deeds, 2 flats and 3 flats and small apartment buildings on the south and west sides of Chicago, going back to 1994, stock certificates, a folder of municipal bonds, and underneath all of it, the deed I'd put there last, the one I almost never let myself look at. Sterling Cove Club, 40 acres, acquired 2020 through Junebird Holdings, LLC. My company, named for my mother, June, who taught me to quilt before I was tall enough to reach the sewing table. Purchase price, $4.5 million. Current appraised value, just over 7. My daughter had been humiliated at a baby shower. And the lawn she'd been humiliated on, the clubhouse, the rose garden, the dock where those white sailboats were tied, every blade of it belonged to her mother, the lunch lady. Backstory: how I built it. It started in 1994. I was 33, a widow with a little girl, working the kitchen at Mercy General Hospital for $9 an hour plus whatever overtime they'd give me. My husband Walter had died 14 months earlier, pancreatic cancer, 44 years old, gone 4 months after the first scan. We'd had a small policy through his union, but most of it went to the hospital and the funeral home, and what was left after that was $3,800 and a daughter who still asked me every few nights when Daddy was coming back. I was prepping trays one morning when I overheard 2 of the nurses talking about a foreclosed 2-flat over in a rough stretch of the south side. The bank wanted $48,000 for it. Everybody said the block was dangerous and the building was a wreck. Busted pipes, a hole in the back roof, squatters in the basement. I went and looked at it on my day off. I stood in that wrecked kitchen with the plaster falling off the lath, and instead of seeing the mess, I saw 2 families paying rent that would cover a mortgage and leave a little over. I bought it with everything I had, and a loan I had no business getting. The loan officer was an older man near retirement, and I think he just felt for me, a widow in a hairnet with a 5-year-old hanging on her sleeve. He pushed it through. I fixed that building myself, on weekends and on the days I worked early. The library had every book I needed: plumbing, wiring, drywall, tile. And there was a hardware store on the corner with a retired electrician named Stan, who'd lean on the counter and answer any question you had as long as you bought your parts from him. I bought all my parts from Stan for 15 years. He came to my 50th birthday. I was a pallbearer at his funeral. Hannah played on a blanket on the floor with her dolls while I learned to sweat copper joints and hang drywall and lay a straight line of tile. I rented both units to people like me, a home health aide, a guy who drove a delivery route, single mothers working doubles. The rent covered the mortgage with a little left over, and every dollar of that little went into the next building. By 2000, I had 4. By 2010, 16. I never bought a new car. I never took a vacation. I never once ate at a restaurant that didn't have a drive-thru. When the market crashed in 2008, while everyone else was panicking, I was buying. When the pandemic came in 2020, I didn't raise a single tenant's rent, and I told the ones who couldn't pay to stay anyway and pay me back whenever they could. Some of them never could. Some of them are still in my buildings today, paying what they paid in 2019, and as far as I'm concerned, that's a fair price. By the time my daughter laughed at my quilt, I owned 31 properties across the city of Chicago. Estimated value, around $25 million. Rental income after everything, about $1.2 million a year. And separate from all of that, in a credit union on the south side, I kept $4.2 million in cash. Because my mother lived through the Depression, and I will never not have a cushion. And every single weekday, I still got up at 4:30 in the morning and went to Mercy General and made oatmeal and scrambled eggs and lunch trays for sick people and the families sitting up all night with them. The other ladies in the kitchen called me Ruthie. The patients called me sweetheart. Not one of them knew. That was the way I wanted it. I never told Hannah, and people have asked me why, and the honest answer is that I wanted her to become someone without the money in the way. Her father and I both believed the same thing, that you earn your place in this world, you don't inherit it. I thought if I raised her with nothing, she'd build the kind of character money can't buy. I was wrong about her. Not forever, as it turned out, but for a long, hard while. She didn't grow character out of having nothing. She grew a shame that money only made louder. The morning after the shower, I didn't go to my attorney first. I went to the credit union. 20 years I'd banked there. The manager, a man named Paul Okafor, had watched my balance climb from 4 figures to 7 without ever once asking me a nosy question, which is the rarest and most valuable thing a banker can offer. He took me into his office and closed the door. "Ruthie, what can I do for you?" "I need everything liquid and ready to move," I said, "and I need my full statement history for the last 6 years, printed." He didn't flinch. "That's a lot of money to have sitting ready. Everything all right?" "Everything's fine," I said. "I just need to be able to move quickly." He printed what I asked for and walked me to the door himself. 20 minutes, no lecture. That's why I'd banked there 20 years. My next stop was Howard Lindley. Howard's been my attorney since 2002, when I needed somebody to set up my first LLC and stop me from making the kind of mistakes that sink small landlords. He's past 70 now, a little stooped, a little slow on the stairs, but he keeps my files because, as he likes to tell people, I'm the most interesting client he ever had, the woman in the apron who quietly bought half the South Side. His assistant, Gloria, was the one who called him out of his office the morning she opened my folder and saw a deed for the Sterling Cove Club with my LLC's name on it, right under the membership roster I'd printed off, a roster with the name Wexford on it 3 times. Howard came out in his reading glasses and his cardigan and stood there a second, looking from the folder to me. "Ruth," he said, "what in the world is going on?" "I need a full review," I said. "Every property, every account, every entity. And I need you to put me in front of an investigator, someone who does financial fraud." He didn't argue. Howard never argues. He picked up the phone. By that afternoon, I was sitting across a conference table from a woman named Marin Okafor, no relation to Paul, though I took it as a sign, who'd spent 15 years as a forensic accountant before she went out on her own. Mid-50s, cropped gray hair, The kind of person who doesn't fill a silence just to fill it. Howard had used her 3 times. 3 times she'd been right. "Mrs. Calloway," she said, opening a leather notebook. "Tell me what you think is happening." "My son-in-law, Grant Wexford. He works at his father's firm, Wexford and Pace. He earns, as best I can tell, a salary that does not begin to explain the life he lives. I want to know where the money comes from." She didn't blink. "What makes you say it doesn't add up?" So I told her, the watch, the Range Rover, the ski trips to Park City that show up on Hannah's social media 4 times a winter, the house in Lake Forest that listed for $1.8 million the year they bought it. His salary at his father's firm, from what Hannah had let slip once, was around $110,000. His wife, my daughter, didn't work. A man making $110,000 does not carry a $4,000 handbag for his wife and a mortgage like that and a watch like that. The arithmetic was wrong, and I had spent 30 years doing arithmetic that other people thought was beneath me. Marin wrote it all down without comment. When I finished, she closed her notebook. "Give me 3 weeks," she said. She called me on a Thursday night, 18 days later. I was at my kitchen table with the quilt spread out in front of me, looking at the square cut from the pale blue dress Hannah wore to her father's funeral. She'd been 5. She'd held my hand in the front pew and asked me, in a whisper the whole church could hear, why Daddy got to lie down and sleep in a box and she didn't. "Mrs. Calloway," Marin said, "you'll want to sit down for this." "I'm sitting." "Your son-in-law has been running what's called a misappropriation scheme for the last 2.5 years. He moves money out of his clients' managed accounts into a holding account he controls, and he covers it by sending them falsified statements that show the money is still invested and still growing. As far as his clients know, their savings are right where they left them. They're not. He's been spending them." I felt the cold come up from the floor. "How much?" "As of right now, about $840,000. And Mrs. Calloway, that's the part that's going to be hard to hear. Most of his clients are elderly. Retirees on fixed incomes, people who handed him their entire life savings because his father's name has been trusted on the North Shore for 30 years, 58 of them by my count. The youngest is 69. I closed my eyes. "Several of them think they have safe, guaranteed income for the rest of their lives," she went on. "An annuity, a managed retirement account. The day one of them goes to draw on it for a medical bill or a nursing home, there's going to be nothing there. No statement to call back, no money to claim, just a hole where their whole life used to be." I thought about the people I served breakfast to every morning. The old man in the corner of the cafeteria who came down from the cardiac floor with his IV pole and counted out exact change for a coffee, even though I'd told him 100 times it was on me. The widow who sat by the window with her late husband's reading glasses still folded in her purse. People who'd worked their whole lives and trusted that when they did everything right, the system would hold up its end. "Does my daughter know?" I asked. I found nothing that says she does. Her name isn't on the holding account. She has no access to the firm's books. From everything I can see, she believes the 3 of you, her, Grant, and the baby on the way, are living on his salary and family money. She has no idea. And his father, Theodore? That's the part I can't close yet. Ted Wexford handed Grant the day-to-day 18 months ago and stepped back. The scheme starts right around then. My read is the father doesn't know, but I can't swear to it. Not yet. "Send me everything," I said. "All of it." "It's already on its way. Encrypted. Mrs. Calloway." A pause. "What are you planning to do with it?" "I'm going to protect my daughter," I said. "And then I'm going to make whole every person that boy stole from. Every single one." I spent the next 3 nights at my kitchen table reading Marin's report cover to cover. 58 names, each one with the amount they'd handed over and the lie they'd been told about it. I read every one out loud to the empty kitchen because it felt wrong to let those names go by in silence. Eleanor Pruitt, 83, widow. Handed Grant her late husband's pension rollover 4 years ago, $210,000, everything they'd saved in 40 years of him driving a city bus. She believed it was earning her a safe little income every month. It was gone. The statements she filed away in a kitchen drawer were printed lies. Harold and Marie Voss, both 77, married 51 years. Their entire retirement, drained to fund a man's ski vacations and a watch. I knew these people, Not these exact ones, but I knew them. I'd fed people like them oatmeal for 30 years. I'd cut their toast into triangles because that's how their wives used to do it. I'd refilled their coffee and asked about their grandchildren and learned which ones were worried about them. These were the people my son-in-law had robbed so my daughter could carry a handbag that cost more than Eleanor Pruitt's monthly check. I picked up the phone and I called the Illinois Securities Department, and they routed me after a while to a joint office working with the FBI. The agent who finally called me back was a man named David Kim. I told him everything. I gave him the case number Marin had set up, the encrypted file, the 58 names. He was quiet a long moment when I finished. Mrs. Calloway, I want to be clear with you. If this holds up, and from what you're describing, it will, this is federal. This is prison. I understand. And the man we're talking about is married to your daughter. I know exactly who my daughter is married to, I said. That's why I called you and not him. Another pause. We'll open it, but these things take time. Weeks, maybe more. I have to ask you not to tip him off. I won't, I said. And after I hung up, I sat in the quiet and let the train come through and shake the walls, and I looked at the quilt at the square that said Homecoming Blanket 1996, and I tried to find the line between the daughter I'd carried home in that blanket and the woman who dropped it on a table. I couldn't find it. It had moved so slowly I'd never seen it move at all. Then I picked the phone back up and called my property manager. The plan. Vince Marchetti has managed the bigger properties for me since 2014. Steady, smart, never asks a question he doesn't need the answer to. Vince, I want to talk about the Sterling Cove Club. What about it? That place clears $800,000 a year in memberships, Ruthie. It's the best earner you've got. I want to convert it, I said. The whole 40 acres, affordable senior housing, independent units, some assisted, a community garden, a free clinic, a kitchen where they can all eat together, 100 units if the land will take it. The line was quiet for a good 10 seconds. You want to tear down a club that prints money, he said slowly, and put up housing that won't. I want to build something that matters, I said. Can you get architects on it? He let out a long breath. I'll have them out there Monday. Then, after a second, what do you want to call it? Pruitt Commons, I said. After a woman named Eleanor Pruitt. She's 83. She's been paying into a retirement that doesn't exist for 4 years because my son-in-law spent it. And inside it, there's going to be a hall for events and meals, and that one I want named for my mother, the June Calloway Hall. She taught me to sew. Vince didn't ask me a single thing about why. He just said, consider it done. Hannah called me 14 times over the next 8 days. I let every one of them ring through. I was at work for most of them anyway. Morning shift at Mercy, French toast on Tuesday, the old man with the IV pole counting his coins, a young father asleep in a cafeteria chair with his head on his folded arms because his wife was upstairs in labor and he hadn't slept in 2 days. I covered his coffee, some things you don't make a person pay for. On my break, I listened to the voicemails. The first ones were about the shower. Mom, I feel bad about how it went. Grant didn't mean it, you know how he gets. Call me. Then they changed. Mom, something's wrong. Grant's been on the phone in his office all night. He won't tell me what. He yelled at me when I asked. Mom, 2 men in suits came to the firm today. Grant says it's just a compliance audit, but he came home gray. He won't eat. Please call me. Mom, Ted called the house screaming. I heard him say, "Where is the money? I'm 7.5 months pregnant. I don't understand what's happening. Did you do something? Please, I need my mom." I sat on the bench in the locker room and listened to my daughter ask for me, and then I put the phone in my locker and went back to the line. The next tray of biscuits wasn't going to bake itself, and crying in a hospital kitchen scares the patients. 2 weeks after I filed, Agent Kim called. "We're ready," he said. "Everything's confirmed. The holding account, the falsified statements, the diverted funds. We have enough to arrest him." "I need 5 days," I said. Silence on the line. "Mrs. Calloway, this is a federal investigation. It isn't a movie." "No," I said. "It's my daughter's whole life. She's 8 months pregnant and she's married to a stranger and she doesn't know it yet. If you walk into his office on a Tuesday and put him in handcuffs, she will spend the next year convinced it's a mistake. She'll mortgage what's left of her sense to defend him, and she'll blame me for breaking up her family. She has to see it, with her own eyes, in a place that means something. A long breath. And where would that be? There's a place up on the lake, I said. Sterling Cove, 5 days from now on Saturday. She'll be there. So will he and his mother. I'll see to it. You can make that happen? I own the ground it sits on, I said. Yes, I can make it happen. 5 days, he said. After that, we move regardless. Understood. I marked Saturday on my calendar in red pen and went to bed and, for the first time in 2 weeks, slept the whole night through. I spent those 5 days the way I spend every day. I went to work, I fed people, and on Wednesday after my shift I drove out to Yonkers. I mean to say, I drove out to a small apartment in a quiet suburb where Eleanor Pruitt lived. 2nd floor, no elevator. She opened the door in a housecoat with a cup of tea in her hand, 83 years old, white hair pinned up, eyes sharp as tacks behind thick glasses. Mrs. Pruitt, I said, my name is Ruth. I'm not selling anything, and I'm not from any church. I wanted to ask you a question about your retirement account. She let me in. The apartment was small and spotless and crowded with photographs of grandchildren. We sat at her kitchen table, and she poured me tea I didn't ask for. Your account, with Wexford and Pace, I said. Have you ever drawn money out of it? She shook her head. I leave it be. The young Mr. Wexford says it grows faster if I don't touch it. He sends me a statement every quarter. My George's pension is in there, 40 years on the buses. She tapped the table. It's the only thing I've got that'll keep me out of my daughter's spare room when I get too old to manage. I looked at this woman, with her tea and her photographs and her dead husband's pension, and I thought about Grant Wexford dropping my quilt on a table like a used napkin. Mrs. Pruitt, I said, I can't explain everything to you yet, but I'm going to ask you to trust me 1 week. By next Saturday, things are going to be different, and they're going to be better. I promise you that. You're going to be taken care of. She studied my face a long time. You're not from the government. No, ma'am, I cook in a hospital. She smiled then, the whole face of her. Best people on God's earth, she said. Kitchen people. They feed you when you can't do for yourself. You remember that. I will, I said, and I did. Saturday came up clear and bright with a cold wind off the lake. I got to Sterling Cove at noon, 2 hours early. The grounds were empty except for a crew trimming the hedges. I walked the whole clubhouse alone, the dining room with the crystal and the dark wood, the ballroom where the members held their charity galas, the long veranda where I'd stood in my navy dress feeling like a sparrow. Mine. Every chandelier, every panel, every blade of grass running down to the water. I'd never once walked it as the owner. I walked it that day. In the front seat of my car was a rolled-up architect's drawing, Pruitt Commons, 100 units of affordable senior housing on 40 acres of lakefront, a garden, a clinic, a kitchen, the June Calloway Hall, land that had been a playground for people who'd never once stood in a pharmacy doing math, about to become a home for people who'd done that math their whole lives. At 1:30, Hannah's car came up the drive. She got out slowly, one hand under her belly, 8 months now, and exhausted with it. No makeup, hair in a knot, dark circles. She saw me standing at the clubhouse doors and stopped cold. Mom. Her voice cracked on the one syllable. What is going on? You said to come here. You said it was important. It is, I said. Come inside. 5 minutes later, Grant's black Range Rover came up the drive too fast and parked crooked. He got out looking like he hadn't slept in a week, shirt wrinkled, jaw working. Carolyn's car pulled in right behind, and she came across the gravel with her heels snapping, looking everywhere but at me. What is this? Grant said the second he was through the doors. Why are we here? Hannah, get your coat, we're leaving. Sit down, I said. All of you. We stood in the big dining room, the afternoon light coming long and gold through the tall windows. Grant crossed his arms. I don't have time for whatever this is, he said. Hannah. This building, I said. This club, I own it. The room went silent for a full 5 seconds. Then Carolyn laughed, one sharp note. I beg your pardon? I own the Sterling Cove Club, I said. I bought it in 2020 through my company, Junebird Holdings. 40 acres, the clubhouse you're standing in, the furniture you're touching, the dock, the grass, all of it is mine. Grant's face came apart slowly. That's not possible. You work in a hospital kitchen. I do, I said. I also own 31 other buildings across this city. The whole portfolio is worth about $25 million. I've been buying property since 1994, one building at a time, with money I saved cooking other people's meals. Hannah sat down hard in the nearest chair. Her hands were shaking in her lap. Why didn't you ever tell me? She whispered. Because I wanted to see who you'd become without it, I said. And now I know. I kept my voice level, the way you keep it level for a child you love who's done something terrible. You became someone who lets her husband call her mother a lunch lady in front of 40 people and laughs along. You became someone who drops a quilt I spent 11 months sewing onto a pile of trash because it didn't come from a store. Mom, that's not fair. It's not fair, I agreed. It's accurate. There's a difference, and you used to know it. Before she could answer, the front doors opened, and Agent David Kim walked in with his badge out, 2 more agents behind him. Grant went the color of paper. Grant Wexford, Kim said, and his voice was almost gentle. I'm Special Agent Kim, FBI, working with the Illinois Securities Department. We need to talk to you about Wexford and Pace Capital. Grant took a step backward. This is insane. My father's firm has run clean for 30 years. There's not one complaint on the books. Your father's firm was clean, Kim said, and opened a folder. Your accounts weren't. We've documented $840,000 in client funds moved into a holding account you control, covered with falsified statements. 58 clients, most of them elderly. Several of them, right now, today, believe they have retirement income that does not exist. Carolyn grabbed her son's arm. This is a misunderstanding. This is... She spun to face me, and her composure finally cracked all the way through. You did this. You filthy little... I reported a crime, I said. That's all a decent person does when they find one. And Grant came apart completely. You don't understand the pressure I was under, he said, and he was talking to the room now, to all of us, fast. The firm was bleeding clients. The overhead was killing me. I was going to put every cent back. I was going to make it right before anyone. Mr. Wexford, Kim said, you used those funds for a Range Rover, this club's membership dues, and a vacation property in Aspen. None of it was going back. It was temporary, Grant was shouting now. He turned on Hannah, wild-eyed. Hannah, tell them I'm a good man. Tell them your mother is doing this because she's bitter. She's a lunch lady who can't stand what we built, and she's burning it down out of spite. The word hung in the dining room. Hannah looked at him. Then she looked at the folder in Kim's hand, then at me. 58 people, she said. Her voice was very small. Elderly people. On fixed incomes, I said quietly. People who trusted him. People like the ones I make breakfast for every single morning before the sun comes up. Her hand went flat against her belly, and her face crumpled and folded in on itself. Grant Wexford, Kim said. You're under arrest for wire fraud, securities fraud, and financial exploitation of the elderly. The agent beside him stepped in with the cuffs. No, Hannah, do something. Hannah, help me. She didn't move. She sat in that chair with both hands cradling the child he'd been stealing from grandmothers to provide for, and she looked at her husband as though she had never in her life seen him before. The cuffs clicked shut. Carolyn was sobbing into her hands. Grant was still talking as they walked him out across his own marble floor, still explaining, still swearing it was temporary, his voice getting smaller and smaller until the doors closed behind it. And then the big, bright dining room was very, very quiet. Still with me? Tell me something. If you were standing where I was standing, watching this happen, would you have felt justified or just heartbroken? Because I felt both at the exact same time, and I'm still not sure I've untangled them. Drop your answer below, and stay with me, because what my daughter did next is the part of this story I actually want you to remember. Resolution. After the agents drove away, Carolyn left without a word. Just the snap of her heels across the floor, and the slam of a car door and gravel under tires, and then nothing. Hannah sat in that chair for 20 minutes without speaking. I stood by the window and let her. I learned a long time ago that the most important conversations happen in the quiet, and if you rush to fill it, you talk the other person right out of the thing they were about to find. Finally, she said, "You knew. Before the shower. You already knew. I hired the investigator 3 weeks before. Why didn't you tell me?" "Would you have believed me?" I asked. "If I'd called you, the lunch lady you were ashamed of, and told you the man you married was robbing old people, would you have believed me, or would you have hung up and told Grant what I'd said?" She flinched, and then, because she has always, underneath everything, been an honest girl, she said, "I don't know." "Yes, you do." She was quiet a while. "He told me he loved me," she said. "He told me we were building a life." "He was building a lie," I said, "and he let you live inside it. That part wasn't your fault, Hannah, but living in it stopped being an accident a long time ago." "Is my baby going to be okay?" she whispered. I went and sat down across from her and took her shaking hands in mine. "Your baby," I said, "has a grandmother who owns 34 buildings and has $4 million in a credit union on the South Side. Your baby is going to be more than okay. Your baby never has to be afraid of anything money can fix. Not one day of her life." She looked up at me with the mascara running down her face. "Then why," she said, "why did you live like that? The apartment by the train, the hospital, your hands all cracked from the dish soap. If you had all this, why?" "Because your father and I believed work gives a person dignity," I said. "Any work. I bought my first building with money I saved cooking school lunches, and I fixed it with my own 2 hands, the same way I made that quilt. 1 stitch, $1, 1 day at a time. I wanted you to understand that in your bones." I looked around the dining room, at all of it. "And I didn't manage to teach you. That's on me as much as you. I went quiet when I should have talked." And she broke. Really broke. The kind of crying that comes up from somewhere underneath grief, from shame and recognition and the full crushing weight of finally seeing what you threw away. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she said, over and over. "For the engagement party, for the shower, for all of it. I'm so sorry." "I know," I said. "I forgave you the morning after the shower. That part's already done. But forgiving you isn't the hard part. The hard part is what comes next." She wiped her face. "What comes next?" I pulled the architect's drawing out of my bag and unrolled it on the table in front of her. "Pruitt Commons," I said. 100 homes for old people who were told their whole lives that dignity was something they couldn't afford. Right here, on these 40 acres, the club comes down. She stared at it. "You're tearing it down." "I'm building something better, named for a woman called Eleanor Pruitt. She's 83. Your husband spent her dead husband's pension on a watch." I let that sit. Every dollar Grant stole came from somebody's grandmother, Hannah, somebody's mother. I'm going to put it all back out of my own pocket, every cent of the $840,000, before the federal government ever gets around to it, and then I'm going to build them a place to grow old. She looked at the drawing a long time, then she looked at me. "What can I do?" she said. "Tell me what to do." "That depends," I said. "Are you willing to work?" She moved back to the South Side the next week. I had a 2-bedroom unit sitting empty over in one of my buildings, and I gave it to her. She filed for divorce the same month. Ted Wexford, the father, and I'll give the man this much, when he understood the full size of what his son had done, he cooperated completely and started liquidating the firm's reserves to pay back every client he could, on top of what I'd already covered. The 2 of us never once spoke. We didn't need to. We were doing the same arithmetic from opposite ends. Hannah went to work for Vince, entry level, answering the phone, filing inspection reports, learning the difference between a P-trap and an S-trap, getting yelled at by tenants when the heat went out at midnight, the way I'd been yelled at for 30 years. She didn't complain, not once. I kept waiting for it. It never came. Her baby, a girl, was born in October. She named her Ruth, after me, Ruth June, after me and after my mother, the 2 women she'd spent 3 years being too embarrassed to claim. A little over a year after she laughed at my quilt, I stood on the ground where the Sterling Cove Club used to be. The clubhouse was gone. In its place stood rows of bright new apartments, clean and warm and full of light, every one of them designed for somebody who'd been told their whole life that growing old with dignity was a luxury they hadn't earned. A garden in the middle, already turned and planted, a clinic on the ground floor where a nurse came 3 days a week and charged nobody a dime, a community kitchen with long tables, because I have always believed meals are meant to be eaten with other people, never alone, Pruitt Commons, 100 homes, and at the center of it, with her name over the door in iron letters, the June Calloway Hall. Eleanor Pruitt cut the ribbon. She cried. Her daughter cried. Half the people standing there cried, and most of them were strangers to each other an hour before. She'd moved into Unit 47 with her photographs and her George's reading glasses, and the money he'd left her was back where it belonged, and she didn't have to take her daughter's spare room after all. I stood at the back, where I liked to stand, next to Hannah. She had baby Ruth on her hip. She was wearing jeans and steel-toed work boots and a staff jacket with the Pruitt Commons logo on the chest, because by then she was managing the property, really managing it, leases and contractors and midnight phone calls and all. She'd lost the manicure and the handbag and the soft hands. She looked tired and real and like somebody I recognized from a long time ago. "You built all this," she said quietly, watching an old man in a flat cap carry a box marked kitchen up the path to his new door. "From cooking lunches, from fixing pipes." "I built it by showing up," I said. "That's the whole secret, Hannah. There isn't another one. You just show up, every day, whether anybody's watching or not, especially when nobody is." She was quiet a second. The old man with the box nodded at me as he passed, and I nodded back. "Mom," she said, and her voice had gone small again. "I keep thinking about the quilt." "I know. Do you still have it?" "It's hanging on my wall," I said, "behind glass, all 30 squares." Her eyes filled. "Can Ruthie have it? Someday?" I looked at my daughter, at the woman who'd been ashamed of me, who'd let a thief mock me in front of 40 people and laughed because she was scared not to, and at the woman standing in front of me now, in work boots, a year into the hardest job of her life, holding a baby she'd named after a hospital cook. "When you're ready," I said. She nodded. "How will I know when I'm ready?" "When you stop asking," I said. That night I drove home to Bridgeport. Same apartment, same rent, same window looking out at the orange line, the train coming through every 11 minutes to shake the walls and remind me where I started. I could live anywhere now. I could buy a penthouse on the lake with a view of the very water those sailboats used to sit on. I choose this place on purpose because it keeps me honest, and because honest is the only thing I've ever really owned. Above my kitchen table hang 2 things: the quilt, behind glass, 30 squares of my daughter's whole childhood, and a photograph of Walter, my husband, standing in front of Mercy General on my first day of work in 1994, the morning he drove me there in our rusted-out Buick and kissed my cheek and said, "Ruthie, you're going to feed a lot of people in your life." He was right. I fed sick people for 30 years. And then I fed the people the world had quietly decided to stop seeing. Here is the thing I most want you to take from this, whoever you are, wherever you're listening from tonight. Your worth is not your job title. It is not the watch on your wrist or the name of the club on your membership card. It is what you do with the hours you are handed, and whether you do it the same when nobody's watching as you do when everybody is. For 30 years, people looked at me and saw an apron and a hairnet and a tray of oatmeal, and they decided that was all I was. My own daughter believed it for a while, and the whole time, with hands that smelled like industrial soap, I was quietly building homes for people who had nowhere else to grow old. I believe God doesn't measure us by our paychecks. I believe that when I was stirring eggs at 5 in the morning, invisible and aching and certain no one would ever know my name, He was building something through these 2 hands that I couldn't see yet. Every honest hour, every saved dollar, every wall I patched, and every quilt square I stitched. I think He was using me to shelter people who would need it long before I ever knew they existed. And I think the trials He sends us aren't meant to break us. They're meant to show us who we already are. When my daughter dropped that quilt on the table, He was showing me what her heart had come to value. And when she came back a year later in work boots, holding a baby with my name, He was showing me what her heart could still become. So let me leave you with the one thing I'd undo if I could. Don't go quiet with the people you love. Don't hide your story and let them grow up guessing at you. Don't wait for a betrayal to do the teaching that an honest conversation could have done years sooner. I nearly lost my daughter to my own silence. Talk to your children. Tell them where you came from. Tell them what it cost. Tell them before the world tells them wrong. If any part of this reached you tonight, leave a comment and tell me. Have you ever been judged by your job? Have you watched someone you love get lost in a life that was never going to love them back? Share this with somebody who needs to hear that every honest day's work has dignity in it, that the cooks and the bus drivers and the janitors and the kitchen people, they are holding up the whole world the rest of us get to live in. Subscribe and stay with me because there's always another story coming about ordinary people and the moment everything finally turns. Your story matters too. Somebody out there needs to hear it. Thank you for staying all the way to the end. Your time is the realest thing you own, and I'm honored you spent some of it here. God bless you. And remember, it was never a raggedy old blanket. It was a legacy.